All right, next up we have Paladin with Ancestral Guardian, a 4-cost 4/2 with Lifesteal and Reborn. This card is kind of interesting. Like, we've seen a number of like Paladin Lifesteal type cards in the past, like Chillblade Champion. Chillblade Champion allowed you to attack right away with charge, so it's good at like actually, you know, A, hitting opponents, B, getting like an immediate trade and getting you life back, which synergizes very with Lifesteal. This is very likely to get the Lifesteal off because, you know, it does have Reborn, so your opponent has to kill it twice, and obviously kill it twice without actually attacking into it to prevent the lifesteal. But it is kind of fragile. It does trade reasonably well up, and again, like it doesn't necessarily trade down like you might think if it is a fragile minion like this one because of Reborn. Your opponent would have to attack 2 minions into it, and because of Lifesteal, that gives you a lot of life. So this card seems fine to me. I'm not like super excited, super impressed by it, like just jumping out to me. Paladin does have the quest, which cares about Reborn, which, you know, may give this sort of additional amount of appeal in terms of the deck building process for that. But you know, I don't expect to see this just like kind of randomly showing up in Paladin decks, right? Because it's not like super high impact when you play it. Takes some time to actually have its effect. Pretty weak draw in sort of the late game. Because it doesn't have any impact right away, unlike, say, like a Chillblade Champion, again, with the sort of lifesteal charge effect, or something with Rush, etc. Overall, just I think it feels a bit slow outside of a deck that cares about the specific Reborn synergies. Next up, we have Brazen Zealot. It's a 1-cost 2/1. Whenever you summon a minion, gain +1 attack. This card is kind of in the vein of most 1 health 1-drops, most like 2/1s for 1. In that I expect that it's tough to see play because it's so vulnerable against so many things, especially hero powers. I feel like this is, you know, a card that if, you know, you're playing like a Rush style Paladin deck, right? Not Rush in the sense of the mechanic Rush, but Rush in the sense of I'm going to try and play out a lot of stuff and kill you quickly. This has some appeal to it because, you know, if your opponent does have to like attack it with their dagger as a rogue, or they have to, you know, like ping it as like a mage, or, you know, punch it as a druid. This is, you know, like a reasonable cost to them because you're just playing at a bunch of other stuff. There's a decent amount of like stuff that, you know, draws you extra 1 toughness minions, 1 attack minions with Crystology and some of the new stuff. So maybe you can build sort of a swarm style deck there. But in general, I still think that this is, you know, without Divine Favor, there's, you know, less incentive to play like a play out all your stuff Paladin deck. And B, you know, just the vulnerability to not only just hero powers, but like in a world of lackeys, you know, you draw this in the mid game and your opponent has like a bunch of lackeys that can easily trade with it. It's pretty weak. So I don't really see, you know, like this style of Paladin deck seeming like it's likely to be very strong. So I don't really expect this card to see all that much play. Next up, we have Micro Mummy. This is a 2-cost 1/2 mech with Reborn. At the end of your turn, give another random friendly minion +1 attack. There's a lot going on here, right? This is a weird card to me. It's Reborn, so it does work with the quest. It's obviously clearly going the direction of the quest right here. But yeah, I don't know. This is a weird card to me because it feels like it wants to go in a deck with like kind of playing a, you know, swarm type game because you're getting, you know, it makes it more difficult for them to clear off the board because it's Reborn. It, you know, can buff other things. Also kind of feels like it wants to go into the quest deck because it has Reborn, but it goes pretty poorly with a lot of what's going on in the sort of at least curve of a deck that's looking to play the Paladin Quest, because you lose the effect of like the end of turn trigger if you just play the quest on 1 and play this on 2. It is a mech, so, you know, it is something that you could possibly like hit with Crystology. You can like buff it in your hand with like Glowstone Tech and those sort of things, but like it doesn't have Magnetize. You can Magnetize on it, but like doesn't actually magnetize to anything. It buffs things, but those buffs don't stay for Kangors. There's a lot going on here in terms of like synergy potential and in terms of like what, you know, the various pieces of this, but I don't know where it goes. And, you know, there's no like nothing that like immediately jumps out at me as like, wow, this is what I want to do with this, right? And that can be pretty challenging, you know, with a card like this. It does feel like it wants to go, you know, like in some sort of swarm style deck, much like the previous card we talked about. because, you know, it does give you that, like, you know, stickiness that maybe you're playing this with, like, you know, a bunch of small minions and you're playing a bunch of buffs and your opponent, like, AoEs your board and you're like, haha, this guy reborn, I'll buff him, attack you, play something else that also gets buffed. I don't know, like, there's so many pieces to this that are going on here that I feel like there must be something good about it. But at least initially I can't really figure out where I would play this. So I'm not really sure how much play this will see. All right, next up we have the Paladin Quest, Making Mummies. The quest is to play 5 Reborn minions, and the reward is Emperor Wraps, which is hero power becomes summon a 2/2 copy of a friendly minion. This is, I think, one of the less exciting of the quests. Not in the sense that, like, you know, that there isn't, like, cool stuff that happens once you actually complete this quest, but the quest is pretty linear. It's like, okay, you want to play a bunch of Reborn stuff. And then the reward is, okay, well, now you can summon 2/2 copies of things. Summoning copies of things with Reborn is, you know, powerful because it can, you know, give you even more powerful, more value to it, come back even bigger, yada yada. It's powerful with, like, mechs, obviously, if you're playing this alongside Mechanical Whelp, Mechanical Egg. Those don't actually contribute to getting to the quest, but once you have, like, a Mechanical Egg in play, a Mechano Egg in play, and you, like, use the hero power on it, your opponent has to kill both the 2/2 and the 0/5 before you can, you know, they can actually stop you from just getting, you know, another activation the next turn. So it can clearly do some pretty powerful things. My biggest complaint about this is, like, what's going on here? Like, what's conceptually, thematically happening? Like, I remember in, like, Warcraft, you know, where like, Arthas was like, we must purge the undead in Stratholme. Now they're like, you know what we should do? We should do a little bit of necromancy. We should make some mummies. What happened between, like, there and there? Like, was like, Arthas turning into Lich King? Like, they're like, you know, that necromancy didn't go to, you know, that being against necromancy didn't work out too well because we turned into necromancers. I don't know. I don't really get it. But, you know, overall, I think this is, you know, there's clearly some powerful things you could do with this. I'm not, like, again, super stoked because I think it does feel fairly linear. It's like, yes, you want to play, like, things that are powerful to copy, like Mechano Egg and Death Rattle / Reborn stuff. But, you know, it doesn't blow my mind in terms of, like, what are all the possibilities? Because the possibilities seem fairly straightforward. But does seem neat. I'm sure that you know, people will build around this, and it seems like it'll be, like, medium powerful. Doesn't seem fantastic to me. Very, you know, this style of deck will be very vulnerable to silence type effects. Very vulnerable to, like, Priest Plague if that happens. But overall, I would say this is, like, kind of middle of the road in terms of both sort of excitement level and power level for the quests. Next up we have Pharaoh's Blessing. 6 cost, give a minion +4/+4, Divine Shield, and Taunt. This is a very powerful card if you're able to, like, stick a minion. There's already, like, the Spirit, right? Spirit of the Tiger. This is pretty powerful with Spirit of the Tiger, right? Like, one of the things about Spirit of the Tiger that I think was like relatively weak before, one of the things that was fairly weak about Prelate before, was there wasn't a good way to turn Prelate into a defensive minion. There was no Stegodon anymore, right? No Spikered Steed. Pharaoh's Blessing is a thing that you can play on a Prelate that is really powerful. You know, once you start drawing your Prelate with all these abilities, it doesn't get silenced, extremely strong. Very powerful alongside the Spirit of the Tiger. You know, getting a you know, big buff, big, like, defensive set of stats and abilities with Divine Shield and Taunt, alongside, like, a 6/6 from Spirit of the Tiger. I don't think this, like, just goes into, like, any existing Paladin deck. Not that there are really many existing Paladin decks right now, to be perfectly honest. It's not, obviously not like a card that, like, goes into Holy Wrath Paladin, goes into Mech Paladin. But I do think that this, you know, has enough going on for, like, buff Paladin or spell Paladin that it may be pretty good. Again, I don't think it's as good as, like, Spikered Steed in the same spot, but Spikered Steed was a pretty incredible card, and I think that a card being worse than Spikered Steed doesn't mean it's bad. Next up we have Salet's Pride, which is a 3 cost 3/1 Death Rattle, draw 2 1-health minions from your deck. I am a little confused about, like, what's going on with Paladin, right? Like, with, like, Christology wants 1 health, Sully's Pride wants, or rather, Christology wants 1 attack, Sully's Pride wants 1 health. They just want, like, someone who's, like, small in, like, some capacity. You can't be, like, a Paladin and be, like, you know, be, like, big and beefy. You gotta be either fragile or meek. And I guess tigers are fragile, and they die, and you like, find their cubs Is this Simba? Is this Simba dying and then the death rattle is not Simba, Mufasa. This is Mufasa dying and you go find Simba and Nala. Is that what's happening? Spoiler alert, Mufasa dies. Also, there's the hyena alpha in here too, right? So you can have Scar, you can build like a theme battle. I do think that this sort of conditional card draw like this in Crystology are like interesting, right? Because it's like, okay, well, what do I do to take advantage of these? How do I build my deck to take advantage of 1 health minions, 1 attack minions? And I think that being sort of like the Paladin theme, as much as I'm sort of jokingly making fun of it, of like trying to, sort of figure out ways to put those pieces together in an effective way, I think is interesting. But like 1 health, it's like 1 health is hard to get high impact stuff for. I haven't really looked a ton through the spoilers and like searching for 1 health things. There's stuff like Twilight Drake this hits, if you're looking for high impact stuff, that hits like Faceless Rager, which work well together. But like, I don't know how much, the rest of Paladin cards work well with cards that care about having like big hand size, because there's not a ton of Paladin card draw outside of these sort of things. I don't know. It's also like, it's a 1 health, 3 mana card. We talked about how weak a 2/1 for 1 was when we were talking about, the 1 drop before in Paladin. So like, having your deck built around things that die to ping, and having to play out this to like get your card draw, and then your opponent pings it or whatever. Yes, it does draw you 2 cards, so if your opponent's spending any sort of resource killing it, you're getting some degree of card advantage, but can you actually survive that sort of tempo loss? I don't know. It's interesting. It could be, maybe you play this in like Dragon Paladin, right? And it gets you just Twilight Drakes. You gotta have something else. But like, having something that you can play in the early turn that like fetches you your Twilight Drakes, which you then play when they're buffed because they have extra cards in your hand, kind of interesting. But I don't know. I feel like this is a tough card to use, at least right now, but it's definitely a card to keep in mind when we see future sets. Speaking of 1 health minions and other 1 health minion stuff, this is Sandwasp Queen. Maybe this is just a deck, right? This is just like you play the Sandwasp Queen on 2, it dies, it gives you 2 Sandwasps. You play Salid's Pride on 3, it gives you 2 Twilight Drakes, and you're like, bam, Twilight Drake. It's bigger because I have more stuff in my hand. I don't know. I just don't really see where we're getting with this, right? But this is Battlecry, not even Death Rattle, right? So, this is like a stronger card, at least I think, than in terms of like actually like building toward like a swarm style deck, because it doesn't have to die, A, and B, it's giving you generating stuff from outside the game rather than like having to build your deck toward that. You do have these things like alongside like the new hand buff stuff, right? There's Glowstone tech. There's Arena Fanatic if you really want that. More ways to like make these low impact stuff that you get off of Sandwasp Queen, you get off of Sully's Pride, build together into big stuff. But the problem is, you Glowstone tech a Sandwasp, and congratulations, you have a 4/3. Is that your big finish? Like, like playing a bunch of like buffed up small things in sort of the mid to late game doesn't really do very much in a world of like, Dr. Boom and Dynomatic and Warpath and all this sort of stuff. So I'm not really sure that this style of deck that these are sort of pushing people toward right now really has enough support and really fits well into how the metagame looks to, be likely to break down. I don't really see this sort of thing competing with like a lot of the quests, like the Shaman quest and things like that, just giving you tons of value that really feels like it outshines what these do. But speaking of value cards, Sir Finley of the Sands. 2-cost, 2/3 Murloc, Battlecry for deck has no duplicates, discover an upgraded hero power. This card's obviously great. It's obviously super cool. I've heard a lot of people, compare this to like Gen and Baku or like hero cards or whatever. They're like, oh, you didn't like Gen and Baku, so, you must hate Finley. And they're so different. I think that this is so much cooler than like Baku for a couple of reasons. One, Baku always happened. Every single game, you got the Baku effect, and it happened at the very beginning of the game. And it always did the same thing, right? If you're playing like Baku Paladin, you always had make two Silverhand recruits, and you built your entire deck around that. With this, with Sir Finley, there's games you don't draw Sir Finley, which, mean that you don't always have upgraded hero power, and you discover an upgraded hero power. So you don't just have, the thing that you get to build around every time. The game plays out differently based on whether you draw Finley or not, what upgraded hero powers you get, and frankly, the cards that you draw, because you're a singleton deck, so your deck is likely to play out very differently. So I think this is a powerful card, right? Like it's definitely, you know, being able to get upgraded hero power off of Finley. Frankly, just being able to get an alternate hero power was good with old Finley. So being able to get an upgraded hero power with new Finley is obviously even more powerful. Does come with the cost of playing a singleton deck, but I think that you know, we're going to see some interesting different builds because there's no clear direction you go with this, right? It's not like, oh, okay, you know, you build an aggressive deck. You used to very often build like Finley, put like the old Finley into an aggressive deck, and you're like, I really want to get like Hunter hero power, I really want to get Warlock hero power because I'm trying to, you know, like finish off my opponent. Or just get extra resources, right? I wanted like extra damage. I wanted, you know, Hunter or Mage, you know, if I'm coming from like Shaman or whatever. With this, you know, it's like, well, I don't know. Like, I feel like this, it probably builds itself best as like a mid-range deck because you want to have the adaptability of, well, what does my deck want to do with, you know, this variety of hero powers that are offered here. So I think this card's super cool. I'm really looking forward to play with it. And, you know, obviously, you can play like this plus Zephyrus and have two awesome 2-drops in your singleton deck. And, you know, that both have lots of versatility depending on when you play them in the game. Next up we have Subdue. 2-cost spell, so the minions attack and health 2/1. Meh. I mean, this is, you know, obviously stronger than like a Humility against things where you care about them having, you know, either the ability to be silenced back or passive effect in play. You can kill it. But, meh. Like, I don't know. Maybe you're playing a deck that cares about having like a bunch of spells because you're playing dual Paladin, or you're playing Call to Adventure and you want your Call to Adventure to hit something low. I mean, it is like kind of like removal. You know, it's kind of like a polymorph, right? Like you polymorph something, it turns it into a 1/1. It still has all its abilities, and Paladin can't kill the 1/1 quite as well as say Mage can. You know, you don't get rid of death rattles, you don't get rid of a lot of things that polymorph gets rid of. But you know, it can take out like a giant, right? Like this lets you kill a giant, but you know, which like say Aldor does not, or Humility does not, before your opponent can like Conjure's Calling it like the next turn. It's obviously really good with Pyro. You can use it with Pyro to kill anything and keep your Pyro around even. I think this is like just a fine card. It's not an exciting card, but it does feel like the more I think about it, the more I look at it, the more it feels like it's just kind of like a workhorse sort of role player. That may go into, you know, a variety of decks. You can use that on your own minion, right? So that's actually kind of interesting that you could play this on a Mechano Egg and like trade with it if you want. Yeah, the more I think about it, the more I like it. I think this actually might be just very good. Now, first I'm like, and then I'm like, well, one of the big problems though is like Paladin's card draw, as I've been talking about, just isn't that good. So, you know, like the situations where you just have this sort of sitting in your hand can be kind of awkward. But I definitely think this is going to see play. This is kind of going to be like a workhorse type card, kind of a role player, not an all-star, but I do think this card is going to be pretty solid. So it's only 2 cost and it's close to hard removal, right? Your opponent has like a big thing, as long as it doesn't have Death Rattle, this is, you know, a great way to get rid of it. So I've just like talked myself in a circle from like, I think this card is like mediocre to like, I think this card is just good. So that's my final answer. And this card is solid, unamazing, but solid. And last, but possibly least, is Tip the Scales. 8-cost spell, summon 7 Murlocs from your deck. This is, I don't know, like, it is a very weird card. I feel like if say you're playing Wild and you're playing this with like anything can happen, then it's like this, you just play this, then you play anything can happen, and it's like, okay, I did it. But the problem with this is like, if you're playing like a Murloc deck, like how many Murlocs are you actually playing? You know, like what happens if you just like draw like the second one? Like maybe you're playing this and you're playing a deck that like, maybe this is your only non-lens spell and everything else is Murlocs. And you're like, okay, I lens for Tip the Scales, then I tip the scales, get a bunch of Murlocs, and then I can tip the scales again. I don't know. I feel like this is very unlikely to be a like particularly impactful card, like if you play it like naturally, just because you have to play so many Murlocs in your deck to get to 8 mana and have like summoning seven of them like be good again. You know, like do you play 2 Tip the Scales? Does the second one do anything? But I mean, maybe if you're like, you know, again, if you're playing like a ton of Murlocs and you're playing Prismatic Lens and Tip the Scales, you get to like Prismatic Lens out there, Tip the Scales. Boom! Tons of Murlocs that play at once. And like if you're playing Tasty Fin, your opponent kills all your Murlocs, or at least drawing more Murlocs, it feels like it does require a very, very dedicated deck to do anything. And what it does just like still gets blown out by like any AoE. So I doubt it's gonna be good, but I'm sure people are gonna try it. We'll see. All right, next up we have Priest, and we are starting off with an exciting one. Activate the Obelisk. Quest is restore 15 health. The reward is Obelisk's Eye. Turns your hero power into restore 3 health. If you target a minion, also give it +3/+3. This, I think, is a very powerful quest. I was playing the theory crafting live stream section, and I was playing a version of a deck with Activate the Obelisk, and had a decent amount of success. I think it's very important that you build your deck such that you are using a lot of alternate ways to heal. I actually played against one opponent who, just basically was just playing the Priest quest in a deck that was like, lacking in other significant healing effects, and it just was not good. I think that you need to have significant ways to ensure that you can do like burst healing, AoE healing. I think it plays very well with like Divine Hymn, Circle of Healing, Pyromancer, obviously. Minions that damage themselves, like Injured Blade Master, Stegatron. I even was playing Ornery Tortoise in my deck in order to ensure that I could damage myself, and then I was playing, we'll get to him, the Mini Ragnaros Lightlord, and to just like ensure that I had a bunch of reusable healing effects. And once you get this online, it's very powerful. It's not that hard to get online if you dedicate enough of your deck to it, and it really does end up doing a lot. If you have any minion, that minion can very quickly become a very real threat. I think this card is quite powerful. I'm not convinced that it's like gonna, make a like tier 1 Priest deck necessarily. It's gonna be like super, super strong, because you're still playing a deck that is, reliant on like getting a guy in play, buffing it up, healing it, and like attacking with it. That's hard to do, and devote enough of your deck to that in order to have like tools to beat stuff like Conjuring Mage or Control Warrior / Bomb Warrior or whatever else, because they can once your opponent plays like Dr. Boom, for instance, they're gonna probably just kill whatever you play. It's hard to get something big enough, but you do at least have something that can continuously apply like more and more pressure. If anything does stay alive and they can't like immediately kill it, it's very difficult for them to do so later on. So I will definitely be experimenting with this quest a lot, and I think it will very likely end up somewhere like tier 2-ish in the end. Next up we have Embalming Ritual. This is a 1-cost spell, give a minion reborn. This is pretty interesting. This is something that which you can use to get like a pretty powerful value trade off of like a Death Rattle minion, especially. Just 1 cost to give a minion reborn is like very efficient, right? I feel like this is something that you can very easily do to like get like sneak in a trade with something. I feel like this is like especially powerful again with like a Death Rattle minion, like say Mechanical Whelp, right? Like you Embalming Ritual Mechanical Whelp, and it's like, okay, well, most of what you cared about was a Death Rattle anyway, so that's like a pretty high impact play. You can use this to get like multiple copies of things into like your res pool. It works really well with like Xeric, right? You like reborn your Xeric and you get like 2 Xerics back. You put this on like a what is it, like a test subject. Like there's a lot of ways that you can use this in like a buff style deck that feels pretty good. I don't know that this is like a card that you just put into your Priest deck, right? You're playing like a like I don't think this goes into say the Quest Priest deck. Like it seems like it could be good because you're like, okay, I'll reborn my guy, attack, and then I'll come back at 1 health, and then I'll heal it up. But like it's gonna sit in your hand unless you have like very specific plans that you're gonna actually be using it for. It's hard for me to wrap my head around like everything that you can possibly do with this, but I do think that like as a 1-cost spell, this has a lot of possible utility, and I certainly would not overlook it. My first thought really is like test subject Xeric type deck, because it's very powerful with both of those. And like I think that has like a lot of potential sort of moving forward. All right, next up is Grand Mummy. 2-cost 1/2 reborn, Death Rattle, give a random friendly minion +1/+1. This is a weird card. It's a 1-cost 1/2. It dies. It gives you Death Rattle of give a random friendly minion +1/+1. Reborn comes back as a 1/1. It also has that Death Rattle. So like this is a card that feels like it goes into like Zoo Priest, right? that you want to play like an early, an early high health minion, and then you're like trading things off. Maybe this is good if you're playing like a Light Warden deck, right? And you're like playing out, you're a Light Warden, then your Grandmummy trades something, you buff your Light Warden, and your Light Warden's hard to kill. There's just kind of a lot of parts of this. It's both Reborn and Death Rattle, but like I don't know where it goes. Like maybe you're playing like a shadowy figure on this. You're playing like a kind of a Death Rattle swarm type of deck, of like trying to like play like a bunch of things which give you additional value / board presence when they come back. Like one of the things, like the fact that this. My understanding is this this will not give its, like if this dies by itself, it doesn't Death Rattle and go on itself. So that means that it's not just as impactful an individual minion. It really does need to be in a deck that has like, the intention of building a wider board for that kind of support. Priest doesn't naturally build toward that kind of deck, right? Priest isn't really the class that really supports a bunch of small minions very well, either through its card pool or through hero power. But I do think that this is, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of value for one card. This is basically giving +2/+2 out, and it's a 1/2 then a 1/1 body. So I'm definitely gonna explore using this in sort of a proactive Death Rattle style priest deck and see how it goes. Next up we have High Priest Amet. A 4-cost 2/7 where you summon a minion, set its health equal to this minion's. This is a really interesting card that can go into exactly that kind of deck that I was talking about, of a sort of swarmy deck that's playing a bunch of low impact stuff. Well, if you get this into play, all of your stuff is pretty hard for your opponents to kill. Also, obviously works very well with Reborn. Anytime, one of your minions with Reborn dies, comes back, has whatever health this has. One thing that I am not a huge fan of is how this and some of, it feels like the rest of the set feel like they sort of push Priest more toward being a Divine Spirit Innerfire deck, which is like my least favorite kind of Priest deck to play. I just feel like, I'm playing a sort of situational combo that will, like, does nothing else and then eventually blows someone up, is like, meh. Granted, you can do, like, more things with Divine Spirit than just blowing someone up. But I wish we could move Priest away from being a Divine Spirit Innerfire class. I kind of would love to just see them Hall of Famed, because that being what Priest ends up doing, because that's kind of what's available, and you have to build around that, is meh to me. It's just like not that fun. It just continuously being the same sort of thing. But anyway, this does have more applications than that, right? As I said, this can be sort of the top end of a swarm deck that gives your swarm more survivability. You like play this, attack with like your Reborn minions, your Grandmummies, whatever, and they're all coming back, much harder for your opponent to kill. And having a bunch of 7 health minions at like 4 or 5 mana or whatever is a pretty big deal. So I definitely think that this is a pretty cool card. It has a lot of applications. They're not just Divine Spirit Innerfire, but that's at least where I feel like it naturally leads you, since just having a bunch of minions with high health sort of push you in that direction. Next up we have Holy Ripple. Deal 1 damage to all enemies, restore 1 health to all friendly characters. This is a very, very strong card if you end up with Wild Pyromancer. Works very well with Wild Pyromancer because you can like play something, then damage your opponent's stuff and heal off the damage from Pyromancer. Works really well with anything that triggers off of healing effects. This is a sort of card that feels like it wants to go into that swarm style priest deck possibly, because again, if you like manage to damage like a bunch of things and then have Cleric, or you have Light Warden or whatever else, this definitely is pretty powerful. It's not quite a Spirit Lash, right? One of the big things, Spirit Lash killed your own stuff. Spirit Lash was better in a deck that cared about killing off as much of your opponent's stuff as you could and for like keeping you alive. This is better in a deck that has a board, compared to Spirit Lash, right? A deck that has a board, this only hits your opponent's stuff, and it heals your own stuff, so it can help trigger healing triggers. It can actually just keep your stuff alive. Mostly, I think this is going to be like, okay, like I trade off with some of your stuff, finish it off with Holy Ripple, draw a bunch of cards, or pump up like a Light Warden or whatever. This is not a card that you use to stay alive yourself. It's important to keep, to note this isn't like lifesteal. Like I've seen people be like, oh, this should just have lifesteal. It's like, no, that's not what it does. It's not restore 1 health to you. It's restore 1 health to all of your stuff. It would be insane if you did give this lifesteal though, because if you're putting out a bunch of stuff anyway, boom, gain a ton of life. I do like the fact that this is a way for Priest to have like incremental AoE that is cheaper than Holy Nova, like this little Holy Nova. You're more likely dealing with small boards where this is already pretty good. The fact that it is better with spell damage than a Spirit Lash is, in the sense of you can use spell damage with this and just kill your opponent's stuff and keep your board alive, goes very well with like a Blood Mage Thalnos in this sort of, you know, death rattle swarmy deck we're talking about to kill all your opponent's stuff and keep yours alive. So overall, I think this is like a decent card. It's not like it's not going to be a staple card by any means, because it's not like a Spirit Lash where, again, like a control deck wants to use it and just like keep themselves alive while blowing up the board. It really feels like there has to be a metagame where there are a lot of small minions that your opponents are playing in order for this to really have any real role in the metagame. All right, next up is Penance. 2-cost spell, lifesteal, deal 3 to a minion. This is obviously just a reasonably powerful card if you are trying to kill any decently sized minion, medium-sized minion, and keep yourself alive. Works well with the Priest Quest. You can play this if you're playing as aggressive decks, kill your guy and advance my quest some. I don't know that this is necessarily going to be like a staple card, simply because it only hits minions. It doesn't necessarily, if you're not actually playing the quest, you don't really necessarily care that much about like actually getting the lifesteal effect unless you're playing as like really aggressive decks, because you obviously are playing Priest. You got your hero power. But overall, I do think this is just like solid, right? Like this is, can't finish your opponent off with. It's not like it's a Spirit Bomb, right? Like some people may say, oh, power creep from like Spirit Bomb or Frostbolt or whatever. No, it can't go face. But I do think this is, this is a very, very good card if you're in an aggressive metagame. It's like super, super strong, especially if you are playing the Priest Quest. If your opponents are like just smashing your face and you're getting to advance your quest while killing their guys and healing yourself, that's just super good. Obviously very weak against controlling decks, but if you are playing, Quest Priest, that is generally going to be what is trying to carry you against control. All right, next up is Plague of Death. For when you absolutely, positively need to kill everyone in the room. Obviously, this is very strong. The question is, is it too expensive? I can certainly imagine, Control Priest that looks to play, a bunch of healing effects, a bunch of control effects, Plague of Death, sort of top of your curve to wipe out whatever it is. Can deal with board full of giants, board full of Lucent Barks, board full of Death Rattle minions, and doesn't shuffle them into your opponent's deck like Psychic Scream did. So one of the things about Psychic Scream was that Psychic Scream was like ultra efficient removal. Like it was effectively silenced to destroy all minions, but put them in your opponent's deck. This is similar, except for the fact that you don't have to also have a like burst win condition, which is kind of what you had to have with Psychic Scream. When you were Psychic Screaming, you had to like win the game because you would otherwise lose through fatigue. You had to have something that, other than just grind them out, that won the game for you. But Plague of Death, you don't. Plague of Death can be, okay, I kill your stuff, and now, I'm going to win because I have Elysion or whatever, even if you really wanted to. So, this is incredibly strong against like mech decks, right? You just get rid of all their mech bonuses so they can't even come back with Kangors because it silences them first. So I just think this card is super strong. The fact that it kills everything also makes it better for like a Resurrect deck than a Psychic Scream would be, because you're not like, you're not shuffling your guys in your opponent's decks so you can't resurrect them. Again, 9 mana though. 9 mana is a lot. You need to be playing a deck that is able to keep itself alive before then. Stuff like Penance, goes a long way toward making that happen though. So, is there the possibility of just building Control Priest that just plans to Plague of Death all your opponent's guys, and keep them from actually just ever killing you, and eventually just run them out of stuff, fatigue them, whatever? Entirely possible. We'll see. All right, next up is Psycho Pomp. 4-cost 3/1 battlecry. Summon a random minion that died this game. Give it Reborn. Random friendly minion, crucially. This card is really powerful. So my initial instinct when I saw this card was like, oh, it's kind of awkward because it works poorly with itself. If you bring back, if one of these dies, bring the second one, it's going to be bad. Frankly, like the upside of hitting like a lot of the powerful things like Injured Blade Master with this, right, is like nuts. You get back a 4/7 already, and then okay, it has Reborn too. It's just really, really powerful. Like, whether it brings back a mid-size thing, the only time this is weak is if it brings back something super tiny. So you don't play with something super tiny. And then like the second one, yeah, sure, maybe the second one brings back the first one. If that's like the worst case scenario is once you've already res something and you got to that point in the game that maybe, it's gonna have like a bad result of hitting the first one, that's risk you're going to take because the effect is just so good. Summon a random thing that died this game attached to a 3/1 for 4 is like already powerful, and the reborn effect is just kind of bonkers. It makes it better with any kind of buff stuff, makes it better with healing stuff. This card is just really, really, really good. And even bring back like a Northshire Cleric, right? Like if you hit a Northshire Cleric with this, it's like that's not great, but like your opponent has to kill a Northshire Cleric and then kill the other half of the Northshire Cleric, or else you at least get more card draw. So I think this card is just super good, and I think it's going to be a central feature of a lot of Priest decks moving forward for a very long time. All right, next up is Sandhoof Waterbearer. 5 cost 5/5 at the end of your turn, restore 5 health to a damaged friendly character. So yeah, you remember Ragnaros Lightlord? Ragnaros Lightlord was a really powerful card, and it was a legendary, and it was a class that didn't use healing as well. This, I think, might be just like quietly one of the best cards for Priest in the set. Specifically, it's 5/5 for 5, fine, like unamazing, but the turn you play it, you're pretty much always going to get a heal off. And then if it survives, you just keep getting more heals off. And that's, going to be really powerful, healing yourself, healing your minions, healing things when you have Northshire Cleric in play, healing to help complete your quest, make progress on it. And this card is just extremely powerful. You will very often want like every sort of piece of what's going on here. Like I said, when I was playing the Quest Priest deck during the theory crafting stream, it was really interesting how powerful this card was in so many spots. Like, I would like, just value trade my guys to like get, like card draw from Cleric, with this guy in play. I was playing Ornery Tortoise. I was playing Ornery Tortoise because I wanted to damage myself to ensure that I had ways to heal with this guy. This was like one of the sort of best cards in that deck, it felt like. Now, obviously, like, just how good that is against, say, control decks, is like having, a lot of the sort of low end that I had that helped make this as good as it was viable in like a real metagame. I don't know. But I do feel like this card is extremely powerful against any kind of aggressive deck. And if you have the appropriate synergistic tools like the Quest, can be really powerful even against like mid-range and control type decks, because it is doing a lot of heavy lifting in terms of turning your synergies on. And last, but certainly not least, Wretched Reclaimer. 3 cost 3/3, battlecry, destroy a friendly minion, then return it to life with full health. This is kind of the mythical unsilence card that so many people have wanted. I think this is a really interesting card. It's great with death rattles. It's great with reborn things. It's great with, just again, unsilencing your stuff. You're like, okay, I wanna, get whatever here. But yeah, it gives you a full heal on anything. There's just like a lot you can do with this. It's sort of like a cube, but it only gives you 1 copy of the thing instead of 2 copies of the thing. So you can't go up, but it doesn't take any additional enabling. It's just this. So I don't know. I don't know where this goes necessarily. I don't know like what deck wants this, but like this is good with, like, think of this with like Grand Mummy, right? You play Grand Mummy on 2, you play this on 3. So you kill your Grand Mummy reborns. It also gets a full copy of Grand Mummy because of Wretched Reclaimer. You trigger the death rattle on the Grand Mummy, make one of them +1/+1. So you get a full version of the minion, right? Like, 'cause it's destroy friendly minion and return it to health with full life. So if you use this on a reborn minion, you get a minion that still has reborn, because you get a return it to health version. Then you also get the version that comes back from reborn. So there's a lot that this can do with stuff like Grand Mummy, stuff like even just like what Deadringer, right? It's like, okay, I played Deadringer on 2, don't have anything else going on, right? I have like Loot Hoarder. Like this is very synergistic with a lot of different things. So I think this is really, really interesting. And I am, it's so open-ended. It can do so many different things. I definitely think that it'll see play somewhere. And it's just a matter of figuring out where. All right, next up we have Rogue, and we'll be starting Rogue with Anka the Buried. A 5 cost 5/5 with Battlecry. Change each Death Rattle minion in your hand to a 1/1 that costs 1. This card seems bananas to me. When I first saw this, I was like, oh wow, this seems really powerful. You can get out like big Death Rattles or multiple big Death Rattles in a turn, combined with Necrium Blade or Necrium Vial. And then I actually played against a few people who are using this on the this Theory Crafting live streams, and some of the games were just outrageous. You get out like the octopus dude, right? Like you Anka the Buried. There's one game against Dog, I think it was. played like Anka the Buried, and then played like Mechanical Whelp, Mechanical Whelp, Mechanical Whelp, Cairn, Octosari in like one turn. I'm like, okay. I mean, I do have, you know, some skepticism as to like how powerful this would be, or rather how powerful the deck that uses this will be in the games where it does not play this, because, you know, like if you have a bunch of huge death rattles in your deck and you don't draw your Anka, they can be pretty difficult to actually use. But it does seem just like super strong. Granted, you know, there's obviously silence counters to that, you know, opponents stopping your death rattle guys, Mass Dispel, whatever, Plague of Death, the priest one, whatever. A lot of tools that you can use to combat this, but outside of that, you can just have these explosive turns pretty early on, and that can be pretty ridiculous. So I think this is definitely a super sweet card. Definitely going to be a cornerstone of an archetype. How good that archetype is, I'm going to say medium. I think that this feels like, to me, it's more likely to be like sort of a tier 2-ish deck, but I could see, you know, if it's optimized and, you know, like the metagame suits it, if it's a very like control heavy metagame without silence effects where the sort of death rattle minions are naturally good, I could see the deck ending up possibly even being sort of top tier, as long as, you know, you can actually find ways to beat giants, which is sort of an open question for the rest of the world too. Next up we have Bizarre Burglary, which is the Rogue quest. Add 4 cards from other classes to your hand. The reward is Ancient Blades. While you were stealing from the bazaar, I was studying the blade. 2 cost, equipped a 3/2 weapon with immune while attacking. So this is interesting because the quest and reward don't really necessarily seem super lined up. Like, it's like, I have stolen cards from my opponents and now I get a knife. I guess I stole this knife from someone? I don't know. It's a little weird. And you have to sort of get what like the deck wants, like how the sort of Thief Rogue deck sort of functions and like its weaknesses, to like look at this and be like, oh yeah, that's why I want this. Because like Thief Rogue historically, you know, has been like, okay, I use mana and resources and whatnot to like steal cards in the sort of early game, and then I need to have some way to make up for that in sort of the mid-late game. And Rogue, a slower Rogue deck, needs some way to just stay afloat. Oftentimes, you know, Rogue decks that are like looking to play a longer game don't really have the ability to do that against aggressive strategies, because, you know, you like attack on your opponent's minions and then just die. You don't typically have much life gain, you don't have armor gain, you don't have taunts. So right now, a lot of Thief Rogue style decks, or at least the Thief Rogue style decks that I have been playing, and frankly I've been playing them a lot, are Spectral Cutlass decks. Spectral Cutlass decks are sort of a matter of like getting all the pieces together. And I think that if you were to look at like Thief Rogue builds with Spectral Cutlass and with the Quest, I feel like the Quest version is likely to be substantially better against aggressive decks, in large part because you need less to happen in order for you to actually get like your sort of defensive weapon online. With the Spectral Cutlass version, you know, you need to draw Spectral Cutlass, then you usually need to buff Spectral Cutlass, then you need to play spells to play off-class cards in order to keep Spectral Cutlass around. And a lot of matchups, you don't really have that as an option. Like a lot of times it's sort of, you don't get, you know, you get expensive cards, you don't draw enough of your things that give you, you know, the off-class cards. Or you're playing as Rogue and you're like, oh, well, I only drew Blink Fox, I didn't draw Pilfer and Burglar. So there's a lot kind of going on there that kind of messes it up. I feel like against stuff like Mage, like against Conjurer Mage, Spectral Cutlass is way better than this, because you're not really looking to like, you know, just be attacking your opponent's minions, which is mostly what this does. This is like, okay, I can kill my opponent's minions and not take damage back, and that lets me survive and have time to play the cards that I've stolen. Whereas with Spectral Cutlass, you're like, okay, you know, I'm just killing you. You know, you might be able to like Ray of Frost and Frost Nova my board, but I'm just hitting you like, you know, with this 5 damage Cutlass and killing you with it. Doesn't really work with Ancient Blades, and I don't think you want to play both in the same deck, especially because like Ancient Blades, rather Spectral Cutlass, really wants support in the form of like Deadly Poison and Captain Greenskin, and, you know, without those it's fairly weak. And those don't really synergize super well with Ancient Blades. So overall, I feel like it's likely the Quest is a better direction in most metagames, because you're more likely to care about attacking into opposing guys than you are about like just keeping yourself afloat against direct damage and finishing people off. This is also way more resilient to weapon removal. Against, for instance, like Bomb Warrior, is one of the decks where you're like, oh great, like I'd love to get the life gain from my Spectral Cutlass, but playing against oftentimes Weapon Project and Harrison means that is very unreliable. This, of course, gives you a hero power that you just keep getting to remake the weapon, so it's a lot more reliable. So I do think this is a powerful card. It's very easy to complete, especially with the new spell that gives you off-class spells, which we'll get to in a little bit. And I'm certainly going to be trying it out and comparing and contrasting my experience between this and the Cutlass versions, and I'll let you know how it goes. Next up, we have Bazaar Mugger, a 5-cost 3/5 rush with Battlecry, add a random minion from another class to your hand. I've seen a lot of people who've looked at this and been like, oh, it doesn't seem good, like 3/5 rush is bad, yada, yada, yada. I actually think this card is pretty solid. And the reasons for that are several-fold. One, 3/5 rush is actually a pretty decent stat line in like at least the current metagame. There's a lot of 3/3s. There's, a lot of like Dynomatics, a lot of things that this gets to attack and eat. Like think about Zilliax, right? Very frequently, your opponent plays like a 3/3 with Zilliax, and you're like, okay, attack with my Zilliax. And, your opponent's like, all right, you killed my 3/3, now I'll kill your Zilliax with my, whatever thing that does 2 damage. That's the experience of a Bazaar Mugger. Granted, you don't get the life, which is a very big deal, but you do get a random minion from another class. So in terms of like the removal effect, it's often going to be very similar to what a Zilliax would do, because it's a 3-power rush minion. And it's often going to survive many of the things that a Zilliax would survive. And it's going to give you a random minion from another class. And this is, the fact that it's minion is pretty important, because a lot of the stuff that gives you spells now, right? There's Burglar that gives you spells. There's the new card, which gives you spells. There's Blink Fox, which gives you whatever. This gives you a minion. And getting a minion against control decks is extremely powerful, because it gives you more tools to actually, generate resources. The class minions are generally pretty solid. And, for instance, if you're playing a version with Tess, which you should do because it's way more fun, minions are generally going to be things which are proactively generating you some sort of value with Tess, unlike a lot of spells where it's like, okay, random effect from this spell, could be anything, could be bad. It's like a removal effect, could be bad. So I really like Bazaar Mugger, and I am definitely interested in trying it out. I think that especially if you're playing the Quest version, there's a lot of room to take out some of the stuff that the deck played before, like the weapon buffs and everything. They can easily fit this to give you sort of more defensive tools as well as more like long game value against control. So I like this a lot. Next up, we have Clever Disguise. I was just referencing this. 2-cost spell, add 2 random spells from another class to your hand. This is obviously very good if you're looking to play the Quest. You can even play, Quest turn 1, this turn 2, play another turn 3, coin, dagger. You can complete that quickly. And the fact that it is random spells for another class means that even against other rogues, this sort of new Burgle style allows you to enable your vendettas, enable your underbelly fences, push toward your quest, etc., etc. This is a little bit weird. Like I was just making the comparison with the Bazaar Mugger, that getting a minion is usually more powerful, and I think that that's going to be the case here. I think this is going to generally be less powerful than getting minions, and the fact that it's another class means it's not predictable in any way. So like this could easily get you like like redemption, like eye for an eye or whatever. So some pretty terrible stuff. So you can't really rely on this as heavily for actually generating value that can win you the game like you can the Bazaar Mugger and things like that. But the fact that it is 2 cards toward your quest, or 2 cards toward, if you are still playing Spectral Cutlass, is, a pretty big deal. And, I don't expect this to really see like a ton of play outside of like dedicated thief style decks. It's not like it's just like a good value generator or anything like that. But it does what you want. And I feel like it is a solid enabler for what are some other powerful cards, so I expect it will see play. Next up is Hooked Scimitar, 3-cost 2/2 weapon with combo game +2 attack. I feel like this has some potential for like a ultra aggro rogue type deck. Like if you compare this to Wagglepick, right? In like a like mid-range-ish aggro deck, like I would describe most of the sort of Spirit of the Shark type decks. I think it's pretty clear that Wagglepick is a stronger choice. But I can easily imagine a deck that wants both, or wants this and like maybe 2 of these in one Wagglepick because you just want to be as fast as possible. One big thing is the fact that this is a 3-cost weapon that you can coin on 2, or like backstab into on turn 3, and play like Dread Corsairs with. You can play out like a pretty strong tempo play, either killing your opponent's stuff or going face. And you know, this is generally going to be like 1 card 8 damage. And maybe you play 2 Hooked Scimitars and a Waggle Pick. Maybe you play 2 and 2 because you just you just get a ton of damage out of these individual cards, and you can start getting that online very, very quickly. So I think this is not likely to be like a oh, you replace Waggle Pick with this. Not likely to be a card that goes necessarily into the same decks that Waggle Pick does now, but can be something that a ultra aggressive version of Rogue wants to play instead or in addition to. And does just produce a lot of damage very quickly. Next up we have Ferro Cat, a 1-cost 1/2 beast. Battlecry, add a random reborn minion to your hand. This one I'm not super excited about. Most of the reborn minions are neutrals, so this doesn't really seem like a card that works well with the quest or with the Vendetta package or anything like that. I mean, I feel like this is mostly just like kind of a cute little mummy cat, and that's going to be its primary purpose being in the set. I think it's like fine. Maybe you play it in a deck that cares about having cheap combo enablers and a little bit of extra extra value from the reborns. I think this is like okay, but I really don't expect this to be a card that sees like a ton of play. You can say, oh, it's a 1-drop that draws a card, and yeah, I mean, I suppose that's like true if you're looking to play like a deck that really wants this 1-drop. But like, do you want that card? You're getting a random reborn minion. That could be a pretty wide range of stuff, not all of which is that powerful. And you can compare it to like Swashbuckler, right? It's like, oh, Swashbuckler, compared to this one. Well, Swashbuckler A was a pirate and saw a lot of play thanks to patches and pirate synergies, and B gave you cards that from other classes that could give you enable stuff for cards like Tess or whatever else, which Rogue still did have back then. So I feel like I don't know exactly where this has a home. It doesn't necessarily go in because there's like the death. What are the Rogue decks, right? There's like Death Rattle Rogue. There's like Tempo Aggro Rogue. There's Combo Style Rogue. There's Thief Rogue. I don't know which of those decks that's necessarily ends up fitting in, and especially with the nerf to Cold Blood, just having a 1/2/1 isn't as big a deal. Like if you compare it to Firefly, right? A big part of what made Firefly good was that it was a 1-drop that also gave you a 1-drop which helped activate your combos. It's one of the reasons that card is so good in Rogue. This is a 1-drop that gives you something, right? So it's not necessarily a reliable additional 1-drop that you can play later. It could give you a 4-drop, a 6-drop, a 10-drop or whatever. So I think this card seems fine, and if there's just kind of a curve Rogue deck that isn't necessarily focused on particular sorts of synergies, maybe this goes in there just as a 1-drop that gives you a little bit extra value, but I'm not sure that deck exists. Next up is Plague of Madness, a 1-cost spell. Each player equips a 2/2 knife with poisonous. This card's kind of weird to me. This was one of the cards that sort of stands out as it feels like a lot of the plagues are these things happen to every to all the minions and stuff, and now it's okay, well, we decided we're giving plagues to all of the evil classes, but we also decided we're not going to give rogues any sort of good AoE. So how do we give them a affects everything card that isn't AoE? And it's this, I guess. It feels very similar to a weapons project, but obviously it's not defensive for your opponent, so it is different in a lot of ways, right? It can actually it kills your opponent's weapon too, but it can also just give you a weapon that kills your opponent's big thing. Maybe this goes into a really aggressive deck that it can be 1 mana 4 damage because you swing at your opponent twice. It could be kill your opponent's big taunt, and you don't care if your opponent attacks into your little minions because, well, they're all little things that you don't care they're poisoning into, and they get the additional damage in. Worth noting, this does not work with Blade Flurry. A lot of people, when there's Envenom Weapon, it's Envenom Weapon Blade Flurry. This, you can't Plague of Madness Blade Flurry. It doesn't carry the poisonous to the Blade Flurry. So very important to know. But yeah, I think if this does see play, it is going to be in a hyper aggressive deck that wants a card that can alternatively be just damage to your opponent's face, a little bit more than daggering or whatever. It's cheap combo enabler as well, and also can punch through big taunts or stuff like a Mountain Giant that comes down early as your little guys go to your opponent's face. Next up is Songket Sapper. 4-cost 4/4 with Death Rattle. Return a random enemy minion to your opponent's hand. It's a pirate, which is fairly crucial. You know, Rogue does have Raiding Party and other things that do care to some degree about pirates. This is sort of a weird card. Does anyone remember Nerubian Ambusher? Was that the card? It was a 4-cost 5/5 that when it died, it returned one of your minions to your hand. But yeah, this basically, you know, Death Rattle Sap your opponent, which is fine. You know, this can be fairly strong with Necrium Blade. Maybe this goes into that Death Rattle deck. Gives you a little bit more utility with Necrium Blade, like you play your Necrium Blade on 3, attack something, you play your Sapper on 4, attack a small thing, bounce their big thing. I think this is, you know, definitely a potentially solid card for like that style of deck. It gives you, you know, some more reasonable curve options that you know, if you're playing the buried minion or whatever, that you're not just only playing enormous things to Death Rattle out. So I think this is potentially just like a reasonably solid card. You know, it gives you a way, an extra way to like deal with like giants and stuff. If you you know, in addition to like obviously actual saps or whatever else, that also allows you to sort of tempo, especially alongside again Necrium Blade. I expect this to be, you know, a card that does see some decent play in the Death Rattle style decks, and probably not really elsewhere. I don't think this is really going to see play outside of a deck that has ways to enable it outside of it just dying. Could Hook Tusk it. That's actually, I just thought of that. Yeah, this could go into like a Hook Tusk deck. You Hook Tusk, you know, trade your stuff into their small stuff, and then your Sappers die and bounce their big stuff. That's kind of interesting too. Okay, so there's another place. It's a Hook Tusk card or a Death Rattle deck card. 2 options. Next up, we are going to walk through the Valley of the Shadow of Death, and then play the rest of Gangsta's Paradise in your head. You can't stop it. At least if you're like, you know, you grew up in the 90s. You can't not hear that song when you hear that. Anyway, 4-cost spell, choose a minion, shuffle 3 shadows into your deck that summon a copy when drawn. So this is interesting. Like, obviously this kind of wants to work with sort of a miracle style deck. You want to play this on some sort of big minion and then draw through your deck, right? We could play like, say, the Songket the Buried, and you play like a 1-cost Cairn or whatever, and you're like, okay, Shadow of Death my Cairn, draw through the rest of my deck with Octosari, get a bunch of extra Cairns in play. A lot of options there. You could make a bunch of extra Octosaris and then really fatigue forever, and that would be cool too. But overall, you know, this card's interesting. There's a ton of possible options with it. It's choose a minion. It's not choose a friendly minion. So if your opponent has a giant thing that you want to try and, you know, get a bunch of, you can go for it. It's definitely a tough card to sort of pull off. You need to, you know, be able to keep yourself alive, spend 4 mana, then draw in order to, you know, to actually get to that point. So you got to be doing some fanciness when it comes to keeping your life total up and clearing the board. But it has very big upside if you can draw through your deck. You're getting 3 copies of whatever giant thing that you end up targeting with this. So cool card, definitely interesting, but I don't really expect it to be sort of a top tier competitive thing. Maybe there's some sort of crazy combo deck that ends up being nutty with this, because, you know, Rogue does have Auctioneer and can always draw through its deck, but we've learned that that's a bit slower and less reliable than it used to be, especially with the nerf to preparation. Last, and possibly least, in Rogue, Whirl Kickmaster. 2-cost 1/2, whenever you play a combo card, add a random combo card to your hand. I think it's just kind of like meh to me. I don't know. I feel like this is too expensive, and, you know, in order to really be, you know, good. It's like a 2-cost thing that's, you know, you kind of want to use to start your combo chain, but if it costs 1, then, you know, yeah, it's a great combo enabler. At 2, it's expensive as a combo enabler. And it's, you know, very unlikely to survive a turn because it's a 1/2. And it's whenever you play a combo card, add a random combo card to your hand. It's not like a Lyra or whatever, right? Where, you know, Lyra is like something that you could use, A, had enablers like Radiant Elemental, and B, you could play cheap cards to get more cheap cards to kind of keep the chain going. This is, you play what are generally relatively expensive cards to get other, like, relatively expensive cards. Like, your best case scenario is that you're like, okay, I play this, I eviscerate you, I eviscerate you, I eviscerate you, I eviscerate you. But, like, most of the time you're gonna be like, okay, I play this, I eviscerate you, you're like, cool, I got Kidnapper. Then you're like, well, I guess I play this, you know, SI Agent. It's like, Perdition's Blade, great. Like, I don't know. I feel like it's very unlikely to really be enough of a payoff to justify, like, how fragile it is and how situational it is.